Naval Ravikant became wealthy without inheritance, connections, or lottery tickets. He claims anyone can do the same by understanding one counterintuitive principle: you don't get rich by selling your time. The highest paid people in the world, entrepreneurs, investors, creators, all figured out how to escape the time for money trap. They learned to own things that work while they sleep. This sounds impossible when you're trading hours for dollars, but Naval breaks down exactly how ordinary people build extraordinary wealth through leverage, specific knowledge, and what he calls permissionless apprenticeships. The path exists. Most people just don't see it. 4 big ideas from Naval's Almanack. 1. Coffee. Let's pour. First, specific knowledge, the thing only you can do that can't be trained or outsourced. Second, leverage, using code, media, and capital to multiply your efforts. Third, judgment, the skill that separates good decisions from catastrophic ones. Fourth, the happiness equation, why most people optimize for the wrong variables entirely. Naval tells the story of a friend who made millions teaching Excel online. Not advanced corporate finance modeling or complex data analysis that requires an MBA. Just Excel. Basic spreadsheet skills that most people think anyone can teach. But here's the thing that made all the difference. This person had worked for years in specific industries where Excel was used in very particular ways. They understood exactly which shortcuts mattered most to accountants versus project managers versus small business owners. They knew the precise pain points that kept people up at night, the specific formulas that could save someone 3 hours of work every week. When they started creating online courses, they weren't competing with Microsoft's generic tutorials or some university's broad computer skills program. They were solving very specific problems for very specific people, and those people were willing to pay serious money for that precision. This is what Naval calls specific knowledge, and it's probably the most misunderstood concept in his entire philosophy of wealth creation. Most people hear specific knowledge and think it means technical expertise or advanced degrees. They imagine they need to become world-class programmers or renowned scientists. But specific knowledge isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about knowing something that can't be easily replicated or outsourced, something that emerges from your unique combination of experiences, interests, and obsessions. The Excel teacher didn't invent spreadsheets or even create new mathematical formulas. What they had was specific knowledge about how real people actually use Excel in their day-to-day work lives. They understood the gap between what the software could do and what people actually needed it to do. That understanding came from years of working in the trenches, seeing the same mistakes over and over, developing shortcuts that saved time, learning which features actually mattered and which ones were just marketing fluff. Specific knowledge has a few key characteristics that make it valuable. It can't be trained in a traditional sense. You can't just take a course and acquire it. It's usually learned through experience, curiosity, and obsession rather than formal education. It's often at the intersection of multiple fields rather than deep expertise in just one area. And here's the crucial part. It's knowledge that society wants but doesn't know how to get without you. Think about this in your own life right now. You probably have specific knowledge that you don't even recognize as valuable. Maybe you've spent years figuring out how to manage a particular type of difficult customer in your industry. Maybe you've developed an intuitive sense for what makes content go viral in a specific niche. Maybe you understand exactly how to navigate the bureaucracy of a particular government agency or how to negotiate with a specific type of supplier. The key insight is that this knowledge becomes valuable when it's scarce, and when it can't be easily replicated by throwing more people or money at the problem. Large companies are actually terrible at developing specific knowledge because they rely on processes and systems that can be scaled. They need things to be reproducible and trainable, but specific knowledge is often messy, intuitive, and personal. It emerges from caring deeply about something that other people find boring or too narrow to bother with. The Excel teacher cared enough about spreadsheet efficiency to notice patterns that others missed. They were obsessed with solving small, specific problems that big software companies couldn't be bothered to address. That obsession, combined with their particular experience, created knowledge that was both valuable and difficult to replicate. This is why Naval emphasizes that specific knowledge is often found at the edges of disciplines, in the weird intersections that don't have formal names or university departments. It's in understanding how psychology applies to user interface design for elderly people using smartphones. It's in knowing exactly how to source materials for a particular type of craft project that's becoming popular. It's in recognizing patterns in data that matter to a specific industry, but wouldn't show up in general analytics training. The beautiful thing about specific knowledge is that it compounds over time. The more you understand about your particular intersection of interests and experience, the more valuable and irreplaceable you become. You're not competing with everyone who knows Excel, or everyone who understands psychology, or everyone who can analyze data. You're the person who knows how these things work together in your specific context. But here's what most people miss: specific knowledge isn't just about what you know. It's about what you care enough to know deeply. It emerges from genuine curiosity and interest, not from strategic career planning. The Excel teacher probably didn't set out to become a millionaire educator. They just cared enough about efficiency and helping people that they noticed things others didn't. Ask yourself, what do you find yourself explaining to people over and over again that they seem grateful to understand but couldn't easily learn anywhere else? There's this moment Naval describes that stops you cold when you really think about it. A 16-year-old kid sitting in their bedroom in suburban Ohio can now build an app that reaches 50 million people in 6 months. Meanwhile, the CEO of a massive Fortune 500 company, with all their resources and decades of experience, might struggle to get that same level of reach even with a $100 million marketing budget. The teenager has something the CEO doesn't have easy access to, what Naval calls leverage without permission. The old forms of leverage required other people's approval. You needed capital, which meant convincing banks or investors. You needed labor, which meant hiring and managing teams. You needed connections, which meant working your way up hierarchies and playing political games. Every step required someone else to say yes to you first. The gatekeepers held the keys, and you had to prove yourself worthy according to their standards. But something fundamental shifted in the last 20 years. Code and media became forms of leverage that don't require anyone's permission. You can write software that works while you sleep, serving customers around the globe without you being physically present. You can create content that spreads to millions of people without needing a publisher, a television network, or a radio station to approve your message first. These new forms of leverage are what Naval calls permissionless. They're sitting there, available to anyone willing to learn how to use them. The beauty of permissionless leverage is that it compounds without linear increases in effort. When you write code, you're essentially creating a digital employee that never gets tired, never asks for a raise, and can serve an unlimited number of customers simultaneously. When you create media, whether that's writing, videos, podcasts, or any other form of content, you're building an audience that can grow exponentially without requiring proportional increases in your time investment. Think about what this means for your own life right now. You probably have skills or knowledge that other people would pay for, but maybe you've been thinking you need to wait for someone to hire you or give you a platform first. That's old world thinking. The infrastructure already exists for you to reach people directly. You can build a website in an afternoon. You can start a newsletter, create online courses, build software tools, or produce content that solves real problems for real people. The catch is that most of us are still mentally operating under the old permission-based model. We're waiting for someone to discover us, promote us, or give us the resources we think we need. But the teenager with the laptop isn't waiting for permission. They're learning to code by watching YouTube videos and building things that people actually want. They're creating content that resonates with specific communities. They're treating the internet as what it actually is, the largest distribution platform in human history, and it's essentially free to use. This isn't just about becoming an entrepreneur or starting a tech company. Even if you work a traditional job, understanding permissionless leverage changes how you think about building your career. Instead of just climbing the ladder within one organization, you can build your own audience, develop your own intellectual property, and create your own opportunities. You can write about your industry expertise, build tools that solve problems you encounter at work, or create educational content that helps others in your field. The key insight is that leverage without permission democratizes opportunity in a way that's never existed before. You don't need to be born into the right family, go to the right schools, or know the right people to create something valuable. You need to learn the right skills and apply them consistently over time. The learning resources are free or cheap. The distribution platforms are free. The barriers that used to keep people out have largely disappeared. What's interesting is that many people recognize this intellectually but still default to seeking permission-based paths. They'll spend years trying to get hired by the right company or waiting for someone to fund their idea, when they could be building something right now with the tools that already exist. The permission-seeking mindset is so deeply ingrained that even when we have access to permissionless leverage, we often don't use it. The real power comes from combining these new forms of leverage with specific knowledge, the things you know that can't easily be taught or automated. When you take your unique insights and multiply them through code or media, you create value that scales far beyond what any individual effort could achieve. You're not just trading time for money anymore. You're building systems that can generate value independently of your direct involvement. Ask yourself, what would you build today if you knew that nobody's permission was required except your own? Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's legendary partner at Berkshire Hathaway, once said something that stopped me cold when I first read it in Naval's Thinking. Munger called judgment the ability to destroy your own best-loved ideas. Think about that for a moment. Here's a man who helped build a $400 billion empire, and his definition of the most valuable mental skill isn't about being brilliant or quick-witted. It's about being willing to murder your intellectual darlings when the evidence demands it. Naval takes this insight and runs with it in a direction that most people miss entirely. He argues that judgment trumps intelligence almost every time, especially when it comes to building wealth and making decisions that actually matter. Intelligence, he points out, is largely fixed. You're born with a certain processing speed, a certain capacity for abstract reasoning. But judgment is a skill that compounds over decades like interest in a savings account. The difference becomes stark when you watch how people navigate their careers and investments. The brilliant analyst who can run circles around financial models but keeps doubling down on losing positions because they can't admit they were wrong. The startup founder with a genius-level IQ who refuses to pivot when their original idea clearly isn't working. Intelligence without judgment becomes a liability, like driving a Ferrari with broken brakes. What Naval understood, and what Munger lived, is that judgment is fundamentally about calibration. It's knowing what you don't know. It's being able to hold multiple contradictory ideas in your head without your ego demanding you pick sides immediately. Most importantly, it's developing the emotional resilience to change your mind when reality votes against your theories. This plays out in ways that reshape entire lives. Naval talks about how the best investors aren't necessarily the smartest people in the room. They're the ones with the best judgment about uncertainty. They can sit with ambiguity. They can update their beliefs when new information arrives. They don't need to be right about everything, just right about the big things and wrong in ways that don't kill them. The practical implications of this shift your entire approach to decision-making. Instead of trying to be the smartest person in every conversation, you start asking different questions. Instead of how can I prove I'm right, you start wondering, what would I need to see to change my mind about this? Instead of collecting information that confirms what you already believe, you actively hunt for disconfirming evidence. This shows up everywhere in your daily life once you start looking for it. Take your career choices. Most people approach job decisions with their intelligence, running spreadsheets and pros and cons lists. But judgment asks different questions. What are the second and third order effects of this choice? How will this position look in 5 years when the industry shifts? What am I not seeing because I want this opportunity so badly? Or consider your relationships. Intelligence might help you win arguments with your partner, but judgment helps you recognize when being right is less important than being connected. Judgment knows that some battles aren't worth winning, that some conversations need to happen when emotions have cooled, that admitting you were wrong often strengthens relationships rather than weakening them. Even in something as mundane as managing your money, judgment beats intelligence consistently. The brilliant day trader who can analyze market patterns gets wiped out by emotional decisions during volatile periods. But the person with good judgment sets up systems that protect them from their own psychological weaknesses. They automate their investments. They build in cooling-off periods for big purchases. They recognize that their future self might have different priorities than their current self. The beautiful thing about judgment is that it's learnable, but it requires a specific kind of practice. You have to actively seek out situations where you might be wrong. You have to build relationships with people who think differently than you do. You have to develop what Naval calls intellectual honesty, the willingness to follow evidence wherever it leads, even when it's uncomfortable. This isn't about becoming wishy-washy or losing confidence in your convictions. Good judgment actually makes you more decisive, not less, because you've done the hard work of stress testing your ideas before you commit to them. You've already considered what could go wrong. You've already planned for multiple scenarios. When you finally move, you move with the kind of calm certainty that only comes from having wrestled with uncertainty. Ask yourself, what's one strongly held belief you have that you haven't seriously questioned in the last year? Naval Ravikant spent years chasing the next milestone, the next achievement, the next level of success. He had built companies, accumulated wealth, gained recognition in Silicon Valley circles, yet he found himself perpetually unsatisfied. There was always something more to want, something else that would supposedly complete the picture. It was during one of these periods of reflection that he stumbled upon what would become his most personal insight. He realized that his unhappiness wasn't coming from what he lacked, but from the very act of wanting itself. This led him to formulate what he calls the happiness equation. Happiness equals health plus wealth plus good relationships minus wanting. The brilliance of this formula isn't in its mathematical precision, but in how it reframes our entire approach to contentment. Most of us spend our lives focused on the addition side of the equation. We work to improve our health, build wealth, cultivate relationships. These are worthy pursuits, but Naval discovered that the subtraction side holds equal, if not greater, power. Wanting, he argues, is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Every desire creates a gap between your current reality and some imagined future state, and that gap is where suffering lies. This isn't about becoming passive or losing ambition. Naval distinguishes between wanting and preferring. You can prefer certain outcomes, work toward goals, make plans for the future, but you don't have to want them in that desperate, attachment-heavy way that creates suffering. When you want something, you're essentially telling yourself that your current happiness depends on getting it. When you prefer something, you're simply expressing a direction you'd like to move in while remaining fundamentally okay with where you are now. The equation also reveals something profound about how we typically think about happiness. We assume it's something we achieve by adding more good things to our lives. Better job, nicer house, stronger relationships, perfect health. But Naval's formula suggests that happiness might be more about subtraction than addition. It's about reducing the number of things you think you need to be happy. This doesn't mean lowering your standards or giving up on improvement. It means loosening your grip on outcomes. Consider how this plays out in your daily life. You wake up and immediately your mind starts generating wants. You want the traffic to be light. You want your meeting to go well. You want your partner to respond to your text quickly. You want the weather to cooperate with your plans. Each of these wants creates a small contract with unhappiness. If traffic is heavy, if the meeting goes poorly, if your partner doesn't respond quickly, you've set yourself up for frustration. But what if you simply preferred these outcomes without needing them? The health component of the equation isn't just about physical fitness, though that matters enormously. It's about mental health, emotional regulation, the basic biological foundation that makes everything else possible. You can't think clearly or relate well to others when your body and mind are in distress. Wealth, in Naval's framework, isn't about luxury or status. It's about having enough resources that you're not constantly worried about survival, that you have the freedom to make choices based on what matters to you rather than what pays the bills. Good relationships provide the social connection that humans need to thrive, the sense that you're part of something larger than yourself. But here's where most people get stuck. They work on all three positive elements while completely ignoring the wanting variable. They exercise religiously but want to be fitter. They save money but want to be richer. They spend time with loved ones but want those relationships to be different somehow. The wanting undermines all their other efforts. The practical application is surprisingly simple, though not always easy. Start noticing your wants as they arise throughout the day, not to judge them or suppress them, but simply to see them clearly. That moment of recognition creates space between you and the want. In that space, you can choose whether this particular desire is worth the happiness cost it creates. Sometimes it will be. Sometimes you'll realize the wanting is just mental noise, a habit of mind that doesn't serve you. This isn't about becoming a passive observer of your own life. It's about becoming more selective about what you allow to determine your happiness. When you reduce the number of things you think you need to be happy, you paradoxically increase your actual happiness. You're no longer at the mercy of circumstances, other people's choices, or random events. Your contentment becomes more stable, more under your own control. Ask yourself, what would change in your life today if you treated your current circumstances as already enough? Naval Ravikant's thinking distills into 4 sharp points that cut through most career and life confusion. First, specific knowledge. You want skills that can't be trained, can't be outsourced, and feel like play to you but work to others. Second, leverage without permission code, media, capital, people, tools that amplify your efforts without asking anyone's approval. Third, judgment trumps intelligence every time. Being right about the few big decisions matters more than being smart about everything. Fourth, happiness equals reality minus expectations. The gap between what is and what you think should be determines your contentment. These aren't feel-good platitudes. They're operating principles for building wealth and peace of mind simultaneously. Pick one thing you do that others find difficult but comes naturally to you, something you do even if you weren't paid. Spend 30 minutes today documenting exactly how you approach it. Write down your process, your shortcuts, your instincts. This is your specific knowledge inventory. Most people never catalog what makes them unique because it feels obvious to them. That's one book, one coffee.